Hi, it's Pastor Andy again with another video update. This video update is going to be different because I'm going to share my testimony. And the idea of sharing your testimony can be done obviously over a long amount of time. But one of the thought processes is to give an elevator testimony, or if how long, what would you say if you had only the trip of an elevator to share a story, share your testimony, whatever. I'm going to do this one a little bit longer, 5 minutes, not just what Jesus has done for me, but what I am now doing for Jesus because of what He has done for me. So that's my goal in this. Excuse me, in this time today. So it'll be a little bit shorter than usual, but hopefully it'll be good. I grew up in church. Literally, we were, our family was very active in church. My father served in the church in ways. My mother did church in the ways, different things in the church as well. And so I grew up. We were always at church, and by age 10 or 11, for a 10 or 11-year-old, I knew a lot. And I won't go into that story, but there's a fun story in all of that. But we never missed church. Some of you might remember when they used to give out pins for perfect attendance. And, if we were out of town, I would make sure we would go to church because I wasn't going to miss my pin. So even though all my motives may not have been right, it was good. But when my parents got divorced at age 13, we just kind of fell away. My mom and I kind of fell away from church, and I never really got back into it. Went off to college, and I can certainly tell you many things that I did that I am not should not have done. But I wasn't like a complete crazy, whatever. I certainly had my issues, but God never gave up on me, and so. Long story short, when I was not quite 21 years of age, I reacquainted with this female that I had known my senior year of high school. She was a freshman, and now she was a senior, and I was a junior in college, and we started dating. And so, well, she went to church on Sundays, and so if I wanted to see her on Sunday before I went back to college, guess what I had to do? I had to go to church with her. And I remember that there was this man at the door on the west side of the church, just with a big bear claw of a hand. And he welcomed me that first week. And, the church was a very loving church. It was a very welcoming and open church. And so because of that, and this man, his name was Bill, um, I felt welcome there. And so I began going to church, not because this girl did, and that girl being Susan, who had become my wife, but because I wanted to. And so over time, at least I was reacquainted. I was getting back into what life in faith was, but I was still distant. I was still immature in many ways personally, let alone spiritually. And so over time, though, that changed. And in 1998, jumping ahead several more years, I completely committed to God. And I was like, I'm yours. You do with me what you want to do. And so He did. A little over a year later, I turned in my resignation at a job, and I began working for my father-in-law. And that gave me more time. That gave me a different amount of time to invest in the faith. And I'd been growing a lot. Our kids were 3 and 4, and then 4 and 5 years old during this time frame. And so it was important for me to be a good dad and to get them in church and all that kind of stuff. But having that time working with my father-in-law gave me a lot of downtime at times. And in 2002, there was just a lot of downtime, and we only had one car, and Susan was gone, and so I had to wait for a ride a lot after getting the kids on the bus. And so I would read my Bible for hours. And 2002 was just a tremendous year of growth. Well, the prior fall, in the fall of '01, God called me to seminary, and this is certainly not true for many people, but he called me to seminary before he called me to ministry. And so, but I didn't really know what that meant. So I started going, I audited class, and that was fine. And then I dove into that. I was bivocational for a while and even trivocational for a while. So taking classes was not always the easiest. And I traveled some. And so, that certainly had an impact. And but continued to find myself growing. I was part of that and trivocational was working in ministry at a church vocationally at that point. And so then in 2009, it was time to put aside a lot of the work I was doing. Of course, the recession impacted us quite a bit personally. But I was like, okay, I'm just going to go to seminary full time. But I didn't know how I was going to pay for it. And this is just one of those confirmations that God was in it all along. There was a lady at the church that I was ministering at the time, and she came up to me one day and said, "God wants me to give this to you." And she gave me several $100 bills, which paid for a semester of my college. And she was she just died a few years ago. Didn't quite make 100 years of age, but just a sweet, sweet lady. I literally would not have been able. I don't know how I would have been able to go to seminary that semester in full time as I did. I took more in those 2 years to graduate with my master's than I had in the previous 8 years combined. And in large part, she played a part in that. So she's was very dear to me throughout that time. And from there, things have just gone crazy. 2 years after that, I started my doctorate, and then finished that and began teaching in the midst of that. Now I have an organization where I help pastors in under-resourced areas around the world. Of course, we're all under-resourced now, I guess, in the midst of COVID-19. But I'm chairman of that organization. I started a podcast last year. I'm teaching on a very heavy load at the seminary, in addition to being a full-time pastor, which I love doing that here in Fairfax. And so all of that to say, that God has a plan for all of us, and that plan included, in fact, in some ways, since we're living on the other side of Christ's death and resurrection, that plan began with his death and resurrection for all of us. He died for us, so the question is, will we live for him? And certainly, I am far from perfect. I'm far from being the man that God wants me to be. That is my vision statement, that I would become the man that God wants me to be, based upon Ephesians 4:1, which says that I would walk worthy of the calling I have, and Ephesians 5:1, which encourages us to be imitators of Christ. That is my goal, but I fail. I am even in my desire to live for him, even in the things that I do for him. I know that I'm hypocritical. There are many more things that I know to do than I am doing, and some of the things that I do are things that I know that I shouldn't do. I'm still imperfect, but that's why he died. That's why he died for me. That's why he died for you. And so, again, just as an opportunity to share my testimony. God is still at work in me today. He is still growing me. He is still leading me, and I am still learning throughout all of this process. And he wants, and a part of what my calling is, a major part of what my calling is to teach. Again, I do that through my mission organization, and that's why I started the podcast, was to help remind people in ministry and even teachers in the local church on tips and things to help them do better. That's why I teach in the seminary, is because I know what God has given me. And Luke 12:48, the end of Luke 12:48 says, "To whom much is given, much is expected." I didn't ask for anything that I have. God's given it all to me. Most importantly, my salvation, but my wife, my family, our church that we serve, just everything. And so it is a real pleasure to be able to serve him. And so, he wants you to do the same. Perhaps God, perhaps you have a strong relationship. How can you continue to live for him and to continue to grow in him? Perhaps you don't know God. God created us to be with him. He wants us to connect with him each and every day, but our sin does not allow that. And so that's why Jesus had to come. There's nothing that we can do to earn that salvation. And so that's why he came. That's why he died. And all we have to do is receive him in order to then to have that opportunity to have an abundant life, not just for eternity, but now. And abundant does not mean riches and fame and all that. No, it means having Jesus. So that's my encouragement today in this shorter video, is to seek him out. And if you don't know Jesus, leave a comment in these videos and let me know, and I'll try to reach out, or we'll have somebody reach out, or email the church, fairfaxmobaptistchurch at gmail.com, fairfaxmobaptistchurch@gmail.com, and we'll reach out to you, because I can't tell you what God would do in your life. I know what he's done in mine, and I just wanted to share that today, with the knowledge that I'm not perfect, and I never will be on this side of eternity. But he has a plan. I'm trying to follow that as best I can, and he wants the same from you. So I hope you have a great day, great weekend, and I look forward to bringing you more videos next week.